Welcome to this explainer. Close your eyes for a second and just imagine the atmosphere of a world that is unknowingly resting on a massive powder keg. It's 1914, and there's this deep, almost cinematic tension building in the shadows. We are about to look back at a century forged in conflict, a time when the entire massive architecture of global power was teetering right on a razor's edge, just waiting to be violently and irrevocably tested. Okay, let's dive into this. We often assume that global superpowers are carved out purely through decades of grueling battlefield conquests and grand, sweeping military strategies, right? We picture sprawling campaigns and master tacticians meticulously redrawing maps over centuries. But what if the greatest superpower in history wasn't actually built on the battlefield at all? What if, instead, it was built by a single decision? When you really get down to the mechanics of global dominance at the dawn of the 20th century, you realize it is terrifyingly fragile. Europe had woven this incredibly complex, incredibly rigid web of political and military alliances, and what that meant was that these massive, seemingly permanent structures of power, they were balancing on the head of a pin. Because of those deeply intertwined treaties, literally all it would take is one solitary choice, one tiny, localized moment in time to trigger an unstoppable domino effect, completely altering the trajectory of nations and plunging the whole world into the unknown. Fast forward just a bit, and we see this stark, almost jarring geographic divide. Across the Atlantic, America was sitting there insulated in an eerie, untouched calm, effectively shielded by a massive ocean. But across that water, Europe was a continent standing right on the precipice, totally destined to be burning in conflict. Now, what's really interesting about this contrast is that to understand exactly how Europe became a massive continental inferno, we actually have to rewind the clock back to one very specific, pivotal year. The year is 1914. And make absolutely no mistake about it, Europe rules the world. And I don't just mean soft influence or some slight economic advantage. This was unparalleled, absolute global dominance. To put that into perspective for you, by this time, European empires controlled roughly 84% of the Earth's entire landmass. 84%. They had effectively turned the globe into their own expansive backyard. Their authority stretched across literally every ocean and every continent, making them the undisputed masters of the Earth. So how exactly did they maintain this iron grip? Well, this immense authority really relied on three crucial lifebloods. We're talking about unrivaled trade networks meticulously moving goods all over the globe, unimaginable, immense wealth flowing directly into their capital cities, and the ultimate military power to relentlessly enforce their will. These three pillars perfectly supported the massive, sprawling empires of nations like Britain, France, and Germany, making them seem, frankly, completely untouchable. And this breakdown brilliantly illustrates just how extreme things were. In 1914, Europe's share of global control wasn't just a simple majority. It was overwhelmingly, wildly disproportionate compared to the entire rest of the world combined. They monopolized the world's economic output, and they dictated international relations from London to Paris to Berlin. They were the undisputed center of gravity for the planet, holding an absolute monopoly on global influence that seemed entirely impossible to break. So, the crucial point here is understanding the sheer, intimidating scale of the dual engines driving all of this dominance. On one hand, you have industrial dominance. Picture giant, churning factories, like the ones fueling Germany's rapid and unprecedented industrialization, and they're being fed by endless colonial routes spanning the globe. And protecting all of that? Ultimate military dominance. Just consider Britain's naval policy at the time. They had a strict mandate that their Royal Navy absolutely had to be larger and stronger than the next two largest navies in the world combined. I mean, it was a staggering machine of power that looked absolutely impossible to stop. But then we reach the catalyst. All of that staggering macro power, the massive fleets, the sprawling colonial wealth, those ironclad treaties, was unknowingly at the absolute mercy of one incredibly localized, isolated moment on the streets of Sarajevo. Let's zoom in on a single figure, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne. Picture the scene in Sarajevo on a summer day. He's riding in an open-top car, serving as this living, breathing symbol of all that immense wealth and military might we just talked about. But then, due to a simple, fateful miscommunication, his driver takes a wrong turn. Realizing the mistake, the driver tries to reverse, and this heavy, clumsy car stalls right there in the street, literally directly in front of a 19-year-old assassin named Gavrilo Princip. In a matter of seconds, the architect of empires is suddenly entirely vulnerable. Then, one gunshot. Princip steps forward and fires. It's a singular, microscopic moment of violence, but it instantly triggers that incredibly rigid trapwire of European alliances. It's a fraction of a second that acts as the ultimate tipping point, bringing the entire weight of the world crashing down. That single sound was followed by a chilling silence. A silence broken only by the startling flurry of birds flying away, and then the complete and total collapse of an era. That single gunshot changed history forever. Within just a matter of weeks, the greatest empires in human history were mobilizing millions of men to slaughter each other. It completely dismantled that massive, supposedly untouchable European order, freezing those giant factories and sinking those invincible warships. The world map was fractured in an instant, which leaves us with this final, vital thought. How rapidly can the foundations of global power be rewritten by a single spark? It really forces us to confront the immense fragility of the modern global systems that we believe to be so permanent today. Because as we've seen, power is never quite as stable as it appears on a map. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this leaves you wanting to explore